Welcome everybody to the virtual wellness series. This is the medicine. We just practiced this. This is the healing as medicine session. I'm going to turn it over to Stu to do an opening.
And Anigana Sotansios, and then you could argue. And they next, I find a key to win and you forget your handle guy for the corner canonium. And Anigan, and wife for canton. Send some boy by your saying, don't you handle now away Nendo. And down again, then how way on. I go yan duck no now when's the gate in and you the van. And Anigan, and how way on. In any time, Tayan don't duck. Young good at on your need to what you could doggy. Nick a dog and while don't nag on Nick Quan. And down it, nay away on. And then your night, what need streenness. Nay time got on. Your congan and gone hawk and all. I went hawk, Nassa, good as good in you. And down it, a thin and it's Nick a gray go scan on. He did with that non yours and your nang go out to Costa. And down it, nay and way up. He has Scott and wire and go on to go home. Started what no your that again you took now one go home. And took quite none what when I and it young glass it can drag 20 what someone today. Nenega go set me ha 19 what someone today. They took an whole way now go and to Nass and white is so. Nego don't hungry nannies cannot to not the new. Need nega nega dogan nanny to the ass and is a boy who nan two once again. And Nidine now what over your noni. On an Andy at Tino, the young glasses are going to drop 20 was someone's the day. Neck or so neck where gone. Some down hot coffin and two once again. That again you took now going to go home. And that took quite none what we now ya. And then anger, I got dying on you. Again against squawgy, who focus on go home. Guy hand it. How we all now not down you. Certainly guy find what no nan to once again. And on in 89, that's where he dog as tea guy now. Whatever he's tongue it. Sound that some way home and to once again. And on 88, and whatever you know, on nan and yet you know, you gain against go again now, we focus on one day hold on you. We focus on one that's again you took now going to go on. And that's quite none about when I and then gonna. They talk guy and us sound down to you and yuck some way this song. They talk guy and duck neck for New York Trump. In that two wins a key. They make a dog as and who we. I hope Nico is. They decide point one. So now song going and go handle but shrine young. Negan and Wardon. So dog one and ask can you and on 89. Now, I was nasty how I hope some way this song. Dog what you should get any home you can duck. 88 now near touch bar job. Nantonia something got he nas and talk and Zari some way this song. And 88 on that. And what the way you know it, they said when on you. So dog one ask can you die on that again you took now going to go home. And that took quite none what when I again you got dog it now had he shot you not you can't you don't waste. You didn't ask I not the new. They ain't any quack it. They go guy find go who did a question. And 89 on that and whatever you know ni. Nan yet no on you. Gain you could dog had he up you not Diokian you don't. That again you took now going to go home. And that took quite none of what when I near home ha gay going here they had now great in Nass and way this song. They gang guy now on Sanyonia. It's all on set on this guy no I don't know. They now had the only sugar. They are some man you could gates. They or Danny down shot. Now need now go away you know it. And they said when on your gone here they had now great in some way this song. That again you took now going to go home. And then it took I know what we need. You get again get tough now you better get to now on you. Down it. That's the back.
So I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us for the virtual community wellness series. I'd just like to go over, the fact that the wellness series started as a COVID pandemic relief, that people were missing out on a lot of things that here in the community that we were missing gathering, missing people, missing smiles, missing faces. And so now that this is year 2, we've definitely taken the advice and feedback from the last series and come up with a whole other series based on the feedback from last year's series. And I was honestly overwhelmed by the number of community members who were looking for more things to do with connecting families in regards to communication and alcohol and addiction. And so this presentation is being presented by Eve, who is the Integrated Drug Strategy Coordinator. And this is a session about people sharing their healing stories and their journeys. And with that being said, there may be some swear words that happen in this presentation. So, just like be mindful that, when sometimes people are sharing their stories, they're passionate about it and things happen. Because of the nature too of sharing, I just want everyone to be mindful that if you are joining us via the Zoom link, that if you have your camera on, that you're going to be broadcasting live. So if you don't want anyone to see you or what's going on in your house, just make sure you turn your camera off. We ask that everybody's microphones be muted. Our communications officer, Caitlin, will mute you if she has to. We ask that people just be kind, be kind in the comments section, be kind in the questions that they're asking, because it takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of courage for these people to come on here and share this really hard topic and this really hard story. They're really hard stories. And so yeah, just be mindful of comments and any kind of bullying or, negative comments. If it does happen, we'll delete those comments off of the Facebook live feed, and you may be asked to leave the session. So just keep in mind all of that. And lastly, if there's any media present, either via the Zoom link or on Facebook, we ask that if you're going to do a story with quotes, please make sure that you're asking anybody who's speaking their permission to use their words. And also, if you have any questions, can you please direct those to Katie at the communications? Her email will be dropped in the chat boxes. So with that, I'll pass it over to Eve.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. And without further ado, I will share my screen to the PowerPoint. All right, so basically, just a short little PowerPoint about myself and the drug strategy as a role as a drug strategy coordinator. So my name is Eve, as Erin had said. I am the drug strategy coordinator at Health Services. I've been here for about 2 years, and I absolutely love it. And here I will definitely explain what the Six Nations drug strategy is. So we are a local drug strategy that aims to reduce the harms associated with substance use. So that includes raising awareness, reducing stigma, and advocating for Six Nations community and its membership. So this does encompass most substances, including alcohol. However, due to the nature of opioids and the opioid pandemic that has resulted out of the general pandemic, we are focusing on opioids. So what are some of the things that we do? Education. So we provide training and education on what an opioid overdose is and how to reduce it and how to reverse it with naloxone. We also provide education on what harm reduction is. Harm reduction is a way of life that reduces the harms that are associated with substance use for themselves, their families, and friends. And we're also currently building an anti-stigma education training and using that and how it affects people who use substances. As well, we do a lot of outreach. So if you see the picture here, we currently use the health bus to meet people where they're at. Whether it's at the plaza or at the gas station, we really want to connect with people who are using drugs and who don't engage in our services and find out what the barriers are for them so that we can make it easier for them to access our services. As well, we are currently in the process of building a Six Nations opioid response. So this response plan came about due to the increases in overdoses that we have seen in the community. So due to the pandemic and the increasingly toxic drugs that are circulating in Brantford and in the community, we realized that a plan is needed to be made in order to combat the overdose crisis. So the goal of the Six Nations Opioid Response Plan is to prevent overdose deaths. And we want to do that using different strategies such as increasing outreach and harm reduction. So we really want to increase the availability of harm reduction services throughout the community. And as we know, harm reduction does come from a strengths-based lens, and it allows people to make the change when they are ready to make the change. And it's all about keeping people alive until they're ready to seek help. We also want to reduce stigma. We understand that stigma can really impact people who are using drugs and can really be a barrier in them wanting to seek services. So we want to, one, educate on stigma, and also understand how it affects people and really talk about the risks of drug use as well, toxic drug supply, where people can get help, and basically how to reduce the stigma around substance use. And we also want to make sure that people have access to our services at the right time. So who is in the drug strategy? Well, it is basically for all of Six Nations. So it includes all the different departments, such as the birthing center, corrections, crisis response, the schools, fire department, the Nakwashra, as well as the Justice Department, health promotion, and Gawaria Degenha land-based healing, mental health and addictions. And we're also working with the methadone clinics, not just in Brantford, but all around in the surrounding areas, as well as Native Horizons and Ogodeni Dow, and social services and police, fire, and paramedics, as well as public works and public health. So this isn't actually an exhaustive list, and I'm always looking for new members to join the group. So we are currently putting policies and procedures in place so that we can have community members and people with lived experience be part of the drug strategy on an advisory level. So speaking about people with lived experience, one of the most important things we can have is the power of having lived and living experience help guide the drug strategy. Because the participation of people with lived and living experience can really help make sure that we are taking a person-centered approach and better serving the needs of those people, as well as the families and their friends. The voices of people with lived and living experience are unique and vital because no one else can speak meaningfully to what their experience of substance use is and the effect that it has had on their lives. There's so many benefits to involving people with lived and living experiences, including the fact that it helps clients tell their stories. It helps with accessing the right services. It helps reduce stigma and offer support as an equal, building genuine connections and positive relationships, and making change possible by sharing their personal experiences to inspire hope. So this is where we are getting into sharing our recovery stories. And we know that recovery is a personal journey and one that cannot be prescribed for an individual. So as we begin with the stories of healing and recovery, just remember that each and everybody's story is important and valuable, and that recovery has different meanings for different people and can look different from one person to the next. And that the impact that sharing your story has on other people can be tremendous in helping other people find their voice and building community. So without further ado, I would like to bring up our first speaker, Carla, and I will introduce you to her. As many of you might or might not know Carla, she is Turtle Clan Upper Mohawk. She is 53 years old and a mom of a 22-year-old son and grandma to a boy named Lyle. Carla works with the Six Nations Development Corporation and has been working there for about 3 years. And she is a recovering substance user and has been clean for about 5 years, going on 6. So here I will stop sharing and I will let Carla tell her story.
Say hello, everybody. My name is Carla. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm just kind of nervous. So I've been an addict for, I guess I was probably started at the age of maybe 19 years old. I lived in the United States, and at first when I was young, I did a lot of baseball. I did a lot of sports. And then once I turned like 19, I got into the bar scenes. I started drinking, partying. I was always with a bunch of friends, and in the bar scenes, I just really like to dance and do things like that. When at the after parties started getting a little rough, I was allowing people into my home, and I was being introduced to different types of drugs and alcohol that they say made you higher and made you feel better. So being pretty vulnerable, I went into that scene, and I was always we were staying up all night, hours of the night, and partying, doing things like that. I was only at first just drinking until somebody had said, "Here, try this," and it was Coke. And I snorted it because I didn't know really anything about drugs, just weed. And so I tried it. I didn't like it. And I didn't like the feeling it gave me with, they call it a drip. I didn't like that. So he introduced me to a different way of how to do it. And so he cooked it up, and when he took me to a whole house, there was a few other people in there, and they're all standing around. I didn't know what the heck they were doing, so just kind of observing what everybody was doing. And so they're like cooked it up and said, "Here, try this." So I tried it, and heck, I got sick all over the place. I was sick, and I just started sweating, and I just went to the bathroom. I threw up all over the place, and I went back, laid back down on the bed, and it was a different feeling. And for some reason, I liked that feeling. And the ceiling was spinning, and I was like, holy heck, I don't know. At the time, I thought I felt great, so I needed another one. So at the time, I had a full-time job. I had a good bank account. I had a vehicle. And I was single. I didn't want for nothing. And I was introduced to this. And lo and behold, it kept going on and on and on. They found out that, well, they knew I had money. And so my bank account went down. I lost my job. I started stealing from work. I started just drinking and partying out in the streets. I was running for people. I was doing, because I had a license, I was the only one could go. So I was the person that was going and helping everybody get their drugs so I could get high too. And that ran out when my money ran out, and I started doing other things. I started dealing, because I didn't want to do other things that I seen other people doing to get the drug. And I thought I was like the coolest person around. I was in the streets, and I couldn't get caught, and I was hanging out with family and friends. And I was just trying to get people who I knew was in the streets, and I did know them at the time because I was smoking, I was already in that scene. And they my house was always like the place to come and cook their stuff up, because you would the person dealing would cut you a piece off, or you'd make your house money. They called it house money. And so any way that I could get it, I was getting it. And in the streets, I was dealing it at night, and I had to stay up with everybody, because that's just how it goes. You stay up with the sales, you stay up with the people, and you just keep rolling your money over and over and over. And in the States, it was different, because over there you could go to Niagara Falls off the streets, and you could get a thing called a double up, and you could double your money, you could double your dope. And then that's how it starts. We would start with $20 and roll right into probably a good $1,000 by the end of the night. And when everybody else ran out of money, you started smoking your profit. And it was just constant doing that all the time. When I was before that, I was going to school. I graduated school way before all this happened. I had went to a recruiter, and I had got accepted into the Marine Corps before this too. So I was always, when I was doing this, I thought I was, I passed the Marines, I was tough. So being in the streets, I thought the same thing. So eventually that came to an end. I started waking up, and something happened with my somebody in my family, and I got out of that. I came to Canada, and I started staying with my cousins and whatnot. And when I came here, that's all we did too, was we were in the bars and having fun, playing pool, darts, stuff like that. So I was in Hamilton, so there's a lot of bars there. And I didn't get into the drugs. I started playing pool, started meeting people. We had a lot of fun. And I eventually met my son's dad playing pool. And I kind of did go back and forth from the States, and still was dipping into that life of the coke life. And once I met him, we kind of had a falling out, and I went back home, and he come back and got me. And when he come back and got me, guess where I was? I was back into a coke house. And he brought me back home. I quit. I came back home to Canada, and I started living with him and his parents. And it was okay. I was off the drugs. We didn't quit drinking. We both were always partying, because that was kind of what we did when we were playing pool or drinking. But that's all it led to, was just drinking. And so we were okay. We were fine. We went on our own. We started living together more. We moved out of his mom's house and his dad's house, and we moved back to Hamilton, back into the party scene again. And we stayed down there, and I started eventually going to school. I started ECE program at Mohawk College, and he was working in the car business. Before then, he was a well-known thief around here, and so I tried to keep him away from that. And so I guess basically we're trying to help each other out. He saved me from the drugs, and I was trying to save him from staying out of jail for the rest of his life. And I in 1999 I graduated the ECE program at Mohawk College, and started working in Aboriginal Head Start. I was a teaching supervisor, and I started and I had my son. He was at home with my mom, and my family always watched him for me. I went back into the workforce after 4 months. And around that time, we moved back to, or something happened, some bad things happened down in Hamilton, and people were getting robbed and shot, and it kind of happened close to my home. So we decided to move back up here on the reservation. I live on the Indian reservation, and we started our family. And he couldn't get out of that scene of drinking and partying and stealing, so we was always fighting about that. He eventually started doing things, and I didn't really know he was doing things, and he started getting into the drug scene, and we didn't really long story short, we split up. We were together for 9 years, and I was a single mom then, and I still was working. I was working 2 jobs, and then I got married, and met my husband, got married. He helped me take care of my son, and then we had everything. We had a farm. We had everything that I could ever want, and eventually that came down because my husband had started drinking and partying, and his family had taken him. I don't know what was going on, but he started drinking and started doing coke, that I found out. And I figured I'd let him stay at home and I'd let him drink, and figured, okay, I'll just let him do that. And he still kept going. He wasn't coming home at night. And then I found out he was doing coke. And I was pretty upset, but then I wasn't upset because I started going back. I went back into that again. And here we go again. I had lost everything again. I had lost my marriage, I lost my son. I gave him to my sister and her husband, and they helped me take care of him. And after a while, I got clean, and then I never really had support around this time. This was about the hardest times that came up, because before around this time, I lost my oldest brother. And then I lost my best friend who stood up with me at my wedding. I lost her from cancer. I lost my brother from cancer. My first brother, then my best friend, and within 13 months, then I lost another brother. And they all passed away from cancer. And that hit me pretty hard. That's when I was always doing the coke and whatnot. And my son didn't want to come back home, and he chose to be with his dad, go live with his dad. Within this time frame, I was taking tests with my doctor and going to counseling. And counseling, I couldn't really find nobody in counseling because I felt I couldn't trust nobody. I didn't have no supports. My family wouldn't help me out. Nobody even felt like I was all alone. And I just started hitting the drugs hard. I started hitting the bottle more. And to release all that pain, I just kept going and going and going. And I was doing the same thing over here that I was doing in the States. I started going in the streets and dealing drugs again. I was hanging out in these drug houses, and I hung out with all the dealers because they knew what I could do. And I was, I guess, one of the profitable people that come. I could bring them $1,000 within 4 hours. And around here, at the time, they liked that because the less people you have come into your house, the better. That way you don't get busted. And so I was one of them people, and a lot of people didn't understand that. That's because I knew how to do it, and because I was always in the streets doing it, and I thought I was good at it. And so my son never came home after this. I was clean. I finally met somebody from health services, and somebody I could trust, and somebody who I knew would support me. The whole time within this time too, I inherited a house, and I have to say I never lost that house. I don't know how many times people came up to me and offered me because they thought I was so drugged out and so down and thought I hit rock bottom. But I knew I was strong enough not to, and I still got my house. And I still have my boy, and I have a grandbaby now. But to me, as long as you have them supports, you're gonna come out on top, and you're gonna be stronger. And one person from the addictions, my counselor, she helped me taught me to believe in myself. First, one person that first taught me to believe in myself really was this lady. I asked for a job because I wanted to get out of this rut that I thought I was in, and I wanted to get my boy back. I wanted to get my mom, my family, everybody back, and get that more positiveness, and for them to just look up to me and know I could do it. And because who knows what would have happened, because during all this time with me being in all these drug houses and whatnot, I seen a lot of shit. I seen a lot. I seen people sit there. I didn't go any deeper than to do the coke and the alcohol, but I seen people take a hit from that heroin, and I seen them pass right out. I've been in places where I've had to save a couple lives. I've lost friends. I've lost family. And when you're in that environment and you see that shit, and just to think that that could have been me, and I know that's what I was putting my family through. And I finally realized that, and I got a job, and I started going to counseling, and I found people that believed in me. I was always getting criticized at work for it because the job that I had, I was dealing with the public a lot, and I was getting looks like you wouldn't believe, which I did take personal at the time. And I just kept going and going, and I was getting them looks and fingers pointed at me when it came to things in the workplace as well. I was getting the finger pointed at me all the time because I was a well-known druggie, I guess you'd say. What people knew and what I knew are two different things. And appreciate them people that gave me that opportunity with my job, with making me believe in myself. And once you have that, I think you have, all you need is that one person to support you and make and believe. And they have to do it with more than words. They have to show you. And that person my counselor did that. And now that I believe in myself, like now I do traditional medicines. Like I won't even look at any drugs or anything. Alcohol, I never really got into alcohol till I was about 21 anyways. And I've seen what that did to my family as well. I did go to school down here. I was in the residential school system. And I also, things happen more then too. Back then when you're little, more than just in the schools, that happened at home. And you've seen a lot of things then too. So with me growing up, it was pretty hard. I was shipped from family member to family member. I didn't grow up with my mom or dad. I did know my mom. I never knew my dad. My grandma raised me, and then when they passed away, my uncle raised us. Then we went from there to my aunt, and when I was of age to cook, clean, and babysit. Then I went to my mom's, but my mom told me that she left because she had wanted to work, and we just stayed home with my grandparents. And I don't know what she went through, but she did. I thought I didn't like my mom for that either, because I just assumed that she was always drinking and stuff like that as well. But I think she probably was living a life that I didn't really know, needed somebody there to be with her and help her as well. But I'm glad that I was able to, my son really saved me. And what really saved me this time more, and what saves me more now, is just having a grandbaby now. During when my son stayed with his dad, I was glad that he went with his dad, because he needed his father figure in his life. And during that time, I had to, with him living with his dad, we lost his dad. His dad was in a car accident, and he lost his dad about 5 years ago or so. And that's when I had to stand up too. I had to be strong for my boy, because he started drinking and getting into the alcohol, and I'm sure the drugs. And I had to deal with my son stealing as well. He was caught. I guess there was a vehicle around, and he was charged with stealing the truck. And so I thought, heck, he's gonna go right into his dad's footsteps, and that's what I didn't want. And I had to help my boy, so I had to put him in counseling too, and to help him stay out of jail. And with all that, I've had to stay strong and be strong. So with me being able to have these supports and whatnot, I know I can do it. And I've been strong, and I've been staying strong. Now I have a good job. I still have my home. When I first had it, I didn't have running water. I have running water. I have my own vehicle. I have it insured, where before I never was driving with insurance. So I really appreciate all the support that I get from the program. And like I said, as long as you have them supports, and I believe you can do anything. We can, I know if I can do it, anybody else, I'm sure can do it as long as you talk about it and discuss it, believe in yourself. You're good. And I thank you for listening, and I thank everybody for the support. Now,
Thank you so much, Carla, for being so brave and vulnerable and for sharing your story with us. I have so much admiration for your strength and your resilience, and I'm so happy of how far you've come, and your story really isn't over yet. And I really hope that the story helped instill a lot of hope for other folks as well. So thank you so much again. So appreciated. And with that, everybody, that is Carla's story. Again, not over yet, but I would like to turn it to our next sharer. And his name is Stu. He is 28 years old, Wolf Clan, Cayuga Nation. Stu's a journeyman and iron worker who has recently taken time off to further his studies in language and ceremony. And Stu, the platform is yours. Thank you for coming on today. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
You're good now? Okay. Yeah, I just want to thank Steve for passing it to me. And Carla, you know, thanks for sharing. You know, I'm glad I got to hear your story. Been through some stuff, and I just want you to know that you're not alone. You said you talked about the you know, having the people in your life and keeping yourself, you know, with the people you need, and I totally understand how that is. You know, so I just want to thank you, and I just want you to know that you're not alone. And you know, we will exchange numbers later, I'm sure. But yeah, I just want you to know that we're not, you know, you're not alone. You know, so first of all, the first thing I want to say is I ask that everybody who's listening or who's going to listen to keep an open mind of what I have to say today. My recovery is my recovery, you know, it's my story. And there's certain things that people might not like to hear. There's things that I might, you know, bring up, I don't know, that it might affect some people who know me. And I just want to apologize to you. So, you know, I won't mention no names. But yeah, let's get into it. I go to AA, and the way we speak, I guess, and for our guest speakers, you know, they tell us that what we need to talk about is what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And so I'll try to just briefly, you know, I'll try to briefly explain the person that I am when I drink and use. I'll try to not get into all my war stories or anything like that. But you know, so please please keep an open mind. So yeah, typical res kid, the typical native kid who, you know, who could have done a lot of things in my life, you know, with sports and went to school and done these things, but I pissed it all away and I put it all, you know, I put it all up my nose, and you know, all of the addict and alcoholic stuff that I did. You know, I was liar, thief, and a cheater. You know, all these things that they explain, these three things, you know, that was me. You know, it's me to a T. So yeah, I grew up here, grew up on the res here, obviously. When my parents split up when I was, 4 or 5, somewhere around there. And so that started my abandonment issues early on that I didn't know I had. And, I remember the day that my dad left, he gave me and my brother the longest hug that I've ever had from him. And, I didn't know what was going on. But that was the last time he was at the house. And he lived, 5 minutes down the road, and I didn't get to see him that much when I was younger. He, it's like he didn't want to see us. So that was a big thing that I've learned and experienced. I've had to deal with and still dealing with to this day with a lot of my abandonment issues. I lost family members young. I lost 2 cousins from the same family young, car accident and a hunting accident. And I was, and they were close. Yeah, we were close. And I think the third death after that was my Uncle Si. And he was one of the ones that really took a toll on me, because he was everything to me. He's my great uncle, but he was my grandpa, and he was a father figure in my life. And so right around that time, I think when he died, I was around 12, maybe 13, but the first time, I think I was 11. The first time I used, it was marijuana, 11 years old. Well, a family member who, we smoked a joint. And I remember not really getting high because the joint was rolled too tight. And so at that time, I didn't think it was, I thought I could do it. I thought I could smoke weed, right? And then the very next time I smoked weed, it was with another family member of mine, and I got really high. I got stupid high, and to the point where I didn't like it. I was obviously laughing my ass off and having a fun time. But I remember thinking at that time, I remember saying to my family member, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't like this feeling. I'm never doing it again. And then the day after, smoking again, and later when I think about it now, I should have realized I was an addict at that time, but I had no idea. So that, that kind of carried on. I started smoking at a young age, and drinking came when I was in grade 8. Again, family member and friends, females, I went to school with were drinking, and I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to drink. I have an older brother who was doing these things, earlier than I was, so I seen it at a younger age. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be that drunk. I wanted to be the alcoholic. I wanted to be the cool kid who's drinking or who's smoking weed. That was the person I wanted to be. I thought that's the coolest thing ever, that, these guys are high school guys are drinking and going to parties and sleeping with girls. That's the life that I chose to live, that I really wanted to live, because I thought that was the coolest thing ever, and so I remember my first drink I ever had, I was in grade 8, like I said, and drank out of a water bottle. I was, these girls filled up a water bottle of Smirnoff, and it was the worst thing I ever had. And I remember taking that first drink, and these girls were looking at me, and I took that drink, and I could feel it going down, burning my insides, burning my stomach, really, really hurting me. And kept a straight face because I wanted to be cool and show these girls that I could drink. And it was weird, because to me, it's like when I did that, they thought I was cool right away. They're like, holy shit, dude, like you can drink and you didn't make a face, right? And little did they know I was crying on the inside, you know, screaming. My insides were screaming at me. But so right from there, I picked up that, hey, I need to drink, and these girls are gonna like me. And that's the way I carried my life. Like, that's the way I carried my drinking career. I was really young when I had, you know, I had sex at a really young age, and it was something that all, you know, my buddies, everybody, you know, who were talking about it, who all this, that was the thing that we needed to do, and if we didn't, we weren't cool. Like, we were joked at if that's what we were trying to do, and it was terrible. I mean, like, I didn't think it was at a time, but that's what, you know, that's the life that I chose to live. And so, you know, so as I got to high school, literally my first day of high school was the first day I started smoking weed every single day, from, you know, free to the day that I stopped. And yeah, I was 13 years old, you know, turning 14 in grade 9 and smoking weed every day. And it was something else, you know. I thought it was helping me. I thought, oh man, you know, let's get high. I can concentrate better. I can learn better. I can listen to my teacher better, you know. And so I justified it and thought it was helping me, right? And I don't know. It definitely wasn't. But I went through that year, you know, and drinking on weekends. They go like take off from my mom and from the house, and, you know, go drink, get caught. We got caught a couple times, and it was a bad timing of things, and it didn't make me want to stop. It made me want to do it more. It made me, you know, want to rebel more, because my mom was mad, and my stepfather, you know, he came to my life when I was around 8. I can't remember, but he was a father figure to me. And at the time I started rebelling, he pulled back from me, and yeah, I didn't like that. You know, it was hard. It was like another abandonment issue. Like, he didn't want to talk to me, and it was really tough to go through that. And it was really tough to be at the house while this was going on, to really you know, to not feel wanted, I guess. And so it really made me want to just carry on. Like, it, you know, like, I wanted to be that person. I wanted to be that drunk, and I wanted to go and have parties, and I wanted to go have sex with these girls. And it wasn't a good life, man. Like, you know, and I grew up playing lacrosse, playing sports all my life, and that carried me into the thought process, because that's what every other person was doing as well. And you know, playing sports, playing lacrosse. And when I got older, you know, I think when I was in grade 10, I started doing ecstasy, you know, snorting ecstasy, doing it at school, you know, because I was cool. And that was a rough time for me. Like, I don't get me wrong, I loved it, but I was scared that I was gonna die from it, because I could feel it affecting me, you know, feel like it was affecting my heart. And, you know, I remember getting a reading, and the person told me that I was gonna die from this pill if I keep taking it. And so what did I do? I stopped doing ecstasy, and I started doing perks. I started doing Percocets, and Percocets is my DOC, my drug of choice. You know, I love it. I get excited talking about it to this day. Like, it's my DOC for sure. And I got into it at that time, and grade 11, I think, I wanted to drop out of school, wanted to just give up on that, you know, go get a part-time job and go do something, you know, and try to live that life, and, you know, do it myself and live at home while I do it. You know, so I had an opportunity to move from here and move to Akwesasne and to basically get a scholarship for lacrosse to get my US credits that I needed, because I probably could have if I didn't get into the mess that I did. And yeah, so I thought the geographical cure, you know, I thought that if I moved away that I'm going to change, I'm going to do better for myself. And as soon as I got there, I just started hanging out with the same kind of people right away. And, you know, and it didn't matter that I left it. I went back to the same way. And, you know, drinking and smoking weed. And I I didn't do those other drugs because I couldn't get them. But if I could have, I probably would have. And I got into some trouble out there. I got into some trouble in the States over a female. And, you know, all the puppy love, and I ended up getting in a fight because of it. And I got in some trouble and I got charged with assault. And, you know, I went to jail for the first time. I think I was 18 years old, 2012, March 1st, leap day, or the day after leap day, I remember. And I went to jail for a week, you know, never been in trouble with the law before. And that was the first time I had to go to jail. And it was tough, man. Like, you know, it was whatever at the time, but like, I was in jail for a week, ended up getting bailed out. And then I thought, you know, this is my chance to do better for myself and get my life together. I thought, you know, that was a sign from the creator that, hey, smarten the hell up, Stu, you know, like it's time to, you know, you still have your chance to do what you want. And alcohol and drugs, you know, I couldn't leave it alone. I ended up graduating somehow, getting out of Salmon. And I ended up going to OCC. And it was not a good choice for me. A lot of my friends went there, and I knew a lot of people there that I probably shouldn't have went. You know, I shouldn't have went there. And I got into coke really bad out there. I got into, you know, drinking really bad out there, being on my own again. And I got into some more trouble out there. Went back to jail out there, charged with misdemeanor charges of busting windows out of cars. No idea why I was doing it. Don't remember. Just remember waking up in jail. And I did a week in jail, you know, my first time of being in a big boy jail. A lot of big guys, a lot of men and scary guys. And you know, I ended up getting out because I was in school. And so I had to tell my probation officer, by the way, I got put on probation for the original assault charge, 5 years felony probation. And that lasted a month. I remember my probation officer from Franklin County in Akwesasne, I finally got a transfer to OCC. And the day that I had to meet my new probation officer, that night before, that morning, I woke up in the apartment underneath my apartment, in the same bedroom that I would be in my bedroom, but one floor down. And woke up. The homeowner woke me up and said, "Hey, you got to get the hell out of here." And I thought it was a friend of mine. I thought it was one of the guys from the lacrosse team. So I was trying to talk to him. He was telling me, "Hey, you got to get the hell out of here, man." And so I ended up walking out of the house and seen the parking lot. Looked at the building number, and it was my building. And I had to just literally walk upstairs. And that was the day I had to go see my probation officer. So I went there, hungover, probably still drunk, probably smelled like a brewery. And yeah, I'm sure he knew, but he gave me a chance. And he said, okay, you know, come back next week. We'll do the same thing over and again. Be doing drug tests and stuff this time. And literally that same night, I ended up going to jail again because I started drinking, and that's when I started smashing the windows out of the cars. And that's when I went to jail. So as I got out there, you know, I got out the week after, and my probation officer breached me, so I got sent back to Franklin County, and I did 4 months there. And you know what? This was the first time I had to do really like some decent time in jail, and it was, to me, like I knew I take full responsibility of what I did. You know, it wasn't right what I did, but I thought that was a gift from the Creator saying that, hey, Stu, again, it's time to smarten up. I'm giving you another chance. So the whole time I was in jail, you know, I had the jail talk, you know, once I get out of here, I'm gonna do good. I'm gonna change my life around. I'm gonna do all of this stuff. And once I got out, I started doing good for the first month, and then I got lonely, and then I got lonely and horny, and I started going out to parties again, and I ended up getting in some trouble again. I ended up being at a party when I shouldn't have been at a party, and there was something that happened there, and my name got brought up to cops, so the cops were at my house the following day. And once that happened, I just said, nope, I'm not going back. And I ended up coming back to Canada, and I've been here since 2013. I came back, so technically still wanted. I have a lawyer. We're looking into it now. Actually, it's going to be resolved with this year, so I'll just say that for the record. Not wanted really technically anymore. But so as that happened, I came back to Canada. All of my dreams, all of my goals that I wanted to be a professional lacrosse player, go to play D1, you know, field lacrosse somewhere, all of these things that I wanted to do as a kid were all taken from me. You know, I took them away from me, took them away from myself. And that's when I really started getting into it, when I came back. And that's when I really picked up my drug of choice, which was perks. And from there on, when I came back, I started doing perks every single day. And since, you know, being a full-blown addict, I was a smart addict. I tried to only have so many, say 5 to 10, because if I had more, I'd just do them all that same day. So I tried to rationalize. So what it came down to was I needed 5 perks a day just to get by, and I was on perks for 3 years. When it came to alcohol and cocaine, it was like the weekend warrior, typical, you know, weekend warrior. I be doing perks every day, come and then I'd go get paid, and then I'd get right back into it. And every single weekend, it was the same thing. I'd spend all of my money. I didn't care, you know, and I knew every single time that it would come close to that, like come close to payday. I knew it was okay. No, Stu, you gotta keep your shit together. You got bills to pay this week, man. Like next week, you gotta have some money in the bank. And every single time, Saturday, you know, Sunday morning, I had nothing. I spent it all and put it all up my nose, and hated my life every single Sunday. You know, that the stupid Sundays having to go home and have nobody around me, nobody left to talk to, nobody left to drink with, no female, no anybody around. And that was the worst time. Those were the worst times that I had. Those were the times that I hated the most, because all I ever wanted to be was with around my friends, and I never wanted to be alone. I hate to this day being alone. And that's what it came down to is, you know, I didn't want to miss anything on these weekends. There was times I didn't even want to drink, but I had to go because I didn't want to miss hanging out with my friends or seeing a certain girl or whatever it was. That I would not miss it, like for anything. You know, and I would take off on the weekends. I'd leave, sneak out Friday night and come back Sunday morning, sometimes Sunday night. And I lived that life, you know, since I was 13, 14 years old, actually going out every weekend. And I felt like I lived like 3 different lives, because I lived this lacrosse life. I lived this traditional life. And then I lived the life of an addict. And not too many people knew, to this day, not too many people knew of what I was doing and just the drugs that I was doing. And, you know, and it's hard to explain to people that, because people didn't know how I used to be. I had, in the last year of my progression, my downward spiral, it was December 2015 is when everything started literally going to shit. I had a girlfriend at the time, and I wasn't a good boyfriend. I wasn't a good partner. You know, I like I said, I drank to be with people. I drank to sleep with girls, and that's the life that I lived. I wasn't a good partner. I cheated. You know, there were I've been cheated on, a lot of things that I had to deal with right from the starting of my drinking career, of being cheated on because of girls, you know, because of drinking, you know, and I just lived that life. I'd rather if you're gonna cheat on me, I'd rather be one up, you know, and that's the life that's literally the shitty person that I was, man. Like, you know, and we were going through some stuff, and you know, and I ended up getting caught. I ended up getting caught cheating, and we broke up that 2016 year, and that's when, you know, all these things were happening to me. I ended up losing. I had a new car. I joined a union for iron workers. You know, I had good things happening for me. I thought I was getting on a good page, but my drinking and my drug use was just, I couldn't let it go. I remember crashing a car that I had in December. I ended up getting a brand new car that year, and I only had that for a month. I crashed that, flipped that, had the rental for a month. I ended up getting a DUI charge, a care and control charge in my rental, sleeping at Big Six. I fell asleep 10, 11 o'clock in the morning at Big Six. And you know, I had a car full of booze and drugs, and yeah, I ended up going to jail, or I ended up getting charged for that in my rental car. And so all these things were happening in that year, the 2016. I ended up getting caught cheating, and my girlfriend left me, and I had nobody else. I ended up being kicked out of the house. Why? Kicked out / left. And I went and lived at a family member of mine, and it really wasn't a good place for me because I was alone. And, you know, he was there every now and then, but I was alone. I kept carrying on and doing the same stuff that I was doing, and which I think was the best thing for me, because that's when I realized, being at that place alone, going through every single weekend of having, you know, being the man of having the money and spending all the money, and then I have no money, and then nobody wants to hang out anymore. And it would always happen like that, you know. And then the Sunday come around and I'm broke and I have nobody to hang out with, and nobody's around. None of my friends are around, nobody's around. And that was tough, man. That was tough to be by myself and hate my life every single Sunday, because I just screwed myself over, dug a deeper hole every single weekend. And uncle, he was staying with me. We were hitting it pretty hard together. And I remember he one day just up and left and said he's going to rehab. And it was a rehab that we go to through our union, or that we can get to through our benefits through our union. And he's an iron worker as well. And he ended up going to rehab. And I was by myself. Like, he was the only person that was around me, always, and then I was really by myself, and he was gone. And I remember just thinking, like, maybe I should get my shit together now. And he was gone for 10 days. Or he was on his 11th day. He wrote me a letter. And he told me that he's 11 days clean and sober. And he can look at himself in the mirror and tell him that he loved himself. And I remember just started crying, because there was no damn way that I could look at myself and tell myself that I loved myself. I tried, don't get me wrong. I tried to go in there and look at myself, and I couldn't even look myself in the eye, because I hated the person who I became and become, and who I was. And he was 11 days. Like, I couldn't fathom that. I couldn't understand how you could love yourself in 11 days of being clean and sober. So right from there, I knew that's what I wanted. I want what he has, because I don't love myself. I didn't love myself. And, so I made the call. I ended up getting accepted into rehab. And while he was there, they told me that I had to wait 2 weeks. And they wanted me to stay sober, clean and sober, for 3 days before I went. And there was no damn way I did that. I tried for the first day, didn't work out. And then the day I had to go was a Saturday. It was the 24th, September 24th, 2016, was the day that I went to rehab. And the day before, I started drinking, and started drinking, and I was doing drugs, and I wanted all my friends to hang out with me, because I'm going, and this is the last time they're gonna hang out with me. Last time I'm gonna see them for a while. And I had no money, and there's only a couple guys who wanted to hang out with me. And so of course I did. I hung out with them, and we're doing some drugs and drinking. And that night was the loneliest night that I've ever felt, because I finally just went home and trying to message my friends. Just like, hey man, like I'm gonna be gone for a month. I was lonely. But nobody wanted to hang out with me. Because I didn't have any money. That's what it felt like. Hey, texting my friends, hey, what's up? What you doing? And hey, you got any money? No. You want to get a text back. And so that's when I realized, and that helped me from there to accept that I don't really have a lot of friends in recovery. Like to accept that a lot of my friends, I can't really be their true friend and hang out with them all the time. And yeah, it was hard for me. So I went to rehab. Like you said, September 24th, 2016. I was 22, turned 23 in rehab. And I had no idea that I was gonna get to where I am today. My plan at that time was, I'm going a year. I don't know what's gonna happen after that, but I'm getting my year, whether anybody likes it or not. And that's the way I committed myself. And so I went to rehab, and that's when I was introduced to AA and NA. And immediately I fell in love with this place, because these people, this welcomed me with open arms. And it was hard for me to go to this meeting, this first meeting that I ever went to. It was hard because it was in a church. And my grandma always told me, don't you dare step foot in the church. It's not for us. So my first time having to go to a meeting, I had to walk in the damn basement to a church. And that was scary as hell. And I'm like, man, I'm going to hell. My grandma's going to be pissed at me. And I don't know what's going to happen. And, these guys just welcomed me with open arms. And I remember being this big guy in there, and he was just staring at me. He's just staring at me, and I didn't like it at all. I'm like, I'm going to get in a fight with this guy because he's staring at me. And then he just, once it was his turn to talk, he just called me it's like he told my story, and then he called me right out and told me that that basically that I'm him, or like, I don't know what it was, but he called me out, he just called me on my shit. It seemed like, and I immediately grew attraction to this guy because he was like celebrating 32 years. I'm like, holy shit, I want that. I wanted that right then and there. I wanted to be 5 days clean to straight to 32 years and everything be fixed. And I thought that's how it was gonna go. So once I came out of rehab, I remember being scared to come back because I was coming back into the real world. Rehab and these places are to me are safe houses, are safe places. But until you get back, that's when the real sobriety starts. And I was scared as hell. I was scared as hell to come back. And so what I had to do in order for me to commit to this is I got rid of my phone. I got rid of social media. And I had to do that because it was so easy for me to just message somebody, or so easy for me to see somebody's story on Snapchat of what they're doing and I miss it. Or any of these things, it was too easy for me to just go back to it. So I had to commit. That's what I had to do. I had to get rid of my phone. I had to get rid of the contacts. And it was probably 3 to 6 months before I, started getting back onto that stuff. And it was tough, man. It was tough the first year, but it seemed easy because, like I said, I had that goal in my head that I'm getting just 1 year no matter what. And that's what I'm going to do. And so my first year of sobriety, all I did was I worked, went to the gym, and I went to meetings. That's all I did, and it helped. Staying busy like that, it helped me get through my first year. And after my first year, I remember thinking that, I had no goal, I had no plan after that. And it affected my recovery. I remember I kind of stopped going to meetings, and I was getting into boxing, and so I was doing that more. Then I want to go to meetings because it followed on the same night, so I was doing that. And I ended up getting a partner 9 months into my recovery, and she was pregnant 3-4 months after that. And so she was pregnant within my my first year recovery, or after my first year, I guess. And so as as that time was coming up for my daughter to be born, I had a rough time. We found out that my girl was going to be born with gastroschisis, which is when your intestines are hanging out of your body where your stomach doesn't fully cover. And that was one of the scariest times, that out of control that I couldn't control times in my recovery. And that was, one of the times where I was so mad at my higher power. I was so mad at the Creator because I was thinking, I'm doing so good for myself. I'm staying on a good path. Why do you got to do this to me? Why does this have to happen to me? All these good things, you know, I'm doing all these good things. Why does this have to happen to me? And for a long time, you know, I thought I could get my answer from him. I thought I was gonna get a sign. Thought I was gonna, you know, something to magically appear and tell me that, hey man, you know, like tell me the answer that I need. And I didn't. I couldn't get it, and I couldn't understand why this was happening until I called somebody in one of my groups, a good friend of mine who is still a good friend of mine today, still a part of my recovery. And you know, he picked me up, and I remember it, you know, telling him, why does this have to happen to me? You know, why me? And he just simply said, why not? I said, because you're gonna have to help somebody to go through that same struggle sometime. Who knows? But that he simply just explained it to me like that. And that's when I realized, and that's when I started really going back to AA, is because I realized that the Creator talks through people. I get the messages that I need to hear in these meetings, in these groups, and from other people if I listen. And you know, so that's what really brought me back to AA and really made me, you know, I'm not leaving. And I say that all the time, you know, even in meetings, I'll explain that, you know, this is everything for me now. But there's probably going to be a time in my recovery where I kind of disappear again a little bit. But, you know, and it's been like that through my recovery. I'd be going every single day, going to meetings every single day, and then stop going to meetings. And then every single time, there's always somebody who comes into my life, somebody who draws me back, a newcomer, somebody who's fucking hurting, excuse my language, but that's what brings me back. And because I'm scared, like, you know, I'm a full-blown addict, I'm a full-blown alcoholic, you know, I was never recovered, I'm not recovered, you know, I'm gonna make mistakes in my life. And you know, so it was tough. And so I kept my ass in AA, kept my ass in meetings, and I still do to this day. You know, life in recovery is something else, man. Like, don't get me wrong, you know, like recovery is nowhere near perfect. Life ain't gonna be perfect. There's gonna be some crazy stuff that happens, and you know, and that crazy stuff that happened in my recovery. I've been through a lot. There's been times where I thought I was gonna relapse. There's been times where I thought I was gonna drink, and you know, and the support is, and the people in the meetings is what keeps me going, because I know what it's like to feel lonely. I know what it's like to feel hopeless, useless. I know all these feelings that when a newcomer comes in, I know exactly what that feels like, you know, and I don't like being alone. I don't like being alone in this. It's hard for me to talk about this kind of stuff to my family, you know, and my immediate family, my partner, and my, you know, my kids and my parents, and because they don't fully understand. They don't fully understand me is the way I'll say it. They don't fully understand how sick I am, and how crazy I can be, and the things that go on in my mind. You know, they they won't understand until then I go to a meeting, and they're like, yeah, I can relate. So that's the reason why I stay my ass in these meetings, and that's what's helped me in my recovery. That's what keeps me going. And you know, I've suffered in recovery. you know, last year, is when COVID hit. It changed everything around here. It changed the meetings. We couldn't go to meetings all the time. We couldn't go to meetings, and it shut down my support. And you know, when COVID hit our reserve, I lost some people in my life, and you know, all within 9 days. My grandma, Uncle Art, Auntie Em, and Auntie Mary, all died within 9 days. As we were all sick, everybody who was at Longhouse had COVID, and you know, I don't deal with death too well. I always have a hard time with death, and you know, at that time, I thought, I thought about drinking, but there was never a time when I was gonna, because to me, I just felt like that was such an insult to them if I just started drinking. You know, they left with and put a big responsibility on my shoulders, and you know, yeah, you know, it was tough, and they left me when I needed them the most, and I still need them to this day. It's tough to deal with that, but you know, I never picked up the drink, you know, and because I knew I had a responsibility, and I knew I have to carry on our ways, and that's the reason why I stopped iron working, because I knew I had to, you know, put all my effort into the ceremonies and language, and you know, learning the language. And I've been doing that for the past year now. You know, all through this COVID, and as COVID was going on, like I said, we didn't have the meetings, and I was losing it. I was getting to the point of, you know, I'm gonna relapse, and so I started having meetings at my house, outside meetings, you know, around the fire, and these meetings they were awesome. You know, being outside, being around the fire, and you know, that probably saved my life. It was tough, man. It was tough to have to go through that. And there, you know, honestly, there were things that I kept to myself, you know, out of AA after all of that happened. And I was scared to admit my mistakes in AA because of certain, you know, I was scared of ruining my reputation of being this person who's in recovery. I was trying to hide behind my 5.5 years of not drinking, and I ended up picking up an outside issue is what AA would say. And I technically, you know, I relapsed. I started smoking weed, and I spoke with somebody in AA, and you know, and they simply just told me that it's an outside issue. But when you're ready to be honest, then you're ready. And this whole week coming up to this, I was scared of being honest with myself. And it was just time, and I don't smoke anymore. And and it was hard. It was hard to, that was the hardest thing that I had to do in a long time right there, is to be honest with myself. And so I've been committed to the groups, because I committed to AA, because I know that if I start drinking, I'm right back. If I start drinking, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna lose everything that I've worked so hard for. So that's why I stayed committed to AA. Dealing with an outside issue myself. And I ended up losing another gram of mine on the opposite side, around Christmas, New Year's. I can't remember the exact New Year's, like this New Year. And I ended up getting COVID again. And at that time, I left home and I stayed at the Longhouse. I stayed here where I am right now. I stayed in my car, and that was prior to the coldest time in January, and I ended up sleeping in my car and sleeping here at the Longhouse. And through that time of being by myself and isolating by myself, fasting by myself, I've seen some things here that I don't normally talk about. Seeing my family that passed on, and I remember sitting in a dining hall and crying, just being scared, just alone. And just trying to deal with the grief that I was, I just lost another gram, another gram on. I ended up seeing all of them, all the people that, my family that passed here. And I grieved for the first time. It really hit me that time. And I felt like I grieved for every single one of them, and I screamed and I cried and I yelled, and I felt, and I seen them, man. And at that time is when I realized, through this isolation, this is what I need to be doing, because if I don't, I'm done. I'm back to drinking, I'm back to doing coke, I'm back to doing perks, I'm back to probably doing worse. And and I knew this was a path. This is the path that has been brought to me, like I knew I went through all of this stuff. I knew I've been through all of these things to help, I've always been tried to help the newcomer that comes, and I was never really fully committed to helping other people until now. And I've been through some stuff lately. I know it's not my story, but my brother, picked up my brother one day and told him he's living with me. That night before, I got a wake up call, and in a dream, or I don't know what it was, but one of my grams told me that they can't help him anymore. And my brother's been doing fentanyl and really into that crazy crack, everything. So I said that, enough's enough and it's time to help, to try. And so I picked him up from his house, and he was actually detoxing at the time. I think he was on his, third day or something like that. And I just picked him up. I said, "You're coming with me. You're coming for a ride." And he hasn't left yet. As of right now, he's doing good. He's almost 2 months now off of that stuff. And I realized at that time this is what I need to do, because if I don't do it, then I'm screwed. Then I'm screwed. And the reason why I had to get that out there today is just because, like I said, this whole week I've been scared of my reputation, scared of not telling the truth. And it was this time I had to. And I hope that I hope that something helps somebody. I hope something that I said today helped. I always ask my creator before I do these kind of things is to help me carry the message, no matter whatever it is. I don't know, but like, so what is like now? What life is like now? Life's been crazy for me. To try to be fully committed into the program, to be fully committed to helping other people. Life has thrown some ups and downs my way, some challenges my way with my family. I've been trying to be fully committed to helping other people and having no time for myself, no time for, I haven't been having the time for my partner. I haven't been having the time for my kids. And that's been tough on me, and it's been hurting me, and it's been hurting my partner really bad. I've been struggling with balance all my life, all through recovery, and to be able to balance taking care of myself, being there for my partner and my kids, trying to help a fellow alcoholic addict who still struggles, trying to stay busy and keep myself from going back. It's tough, man. It's tough. Recovery isn't, it isn't easy. Life's gonna throw some shit at me and at us. So sorry again. But I wouldn't change it for anything. I know if I drink, I'm done. I know if I drink, I'm right back to the cocaine, and I'm probably gonna die. I'd probably go right back to I'd probably start doing the hard drugs. I really don't know. So, I never had the privilege to do these harder drugs. I stopped before these harder drugs came around. I joke around about it with my brother, saying I never had the privilege to do any of those. And I really think if I relapsed, like if I went back to drinking, and I wouldn't be here anymore. So I'm gonna stay committed to what I do. It's tough to balance everything, like I said, and and while I'm doing all this, I'm supposed to be learning the language and doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's hard to fit all that in a 24-hour day. 18-hour day, 18-hour days for I sleep 6 hours or whatever it is, but it's tough, man. But I wouldn't want to change it for nothing, because that's what I'm here for. You know, this morning's been a crazy day for me, because like I said, I haven't been the best partner. I haven't been the best father, because I've been trying to fully put my time into everybody else besides me and my family, or mainly besides my family, my partner and my family. And it's a struggle, man. And, you know, it's been struggling for both of us. It's been a big change for both of us this past, since my brother has been to the house, and since I've been trying to commit into that. You know, we had an argument this morning. We had an argument, and you know, she don't want to do this no more. You know, because I haven't been putting the time in for her and my kids. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to talk about, because, you know, everything that I felt like that I've been trying to do was for, you know, was for my family, but it really wasn't, in my mind, I guess. Yeah, you know, so I thought we were gonna break up today. You know, and she told me, communicated and told me the way she feels and all this stuff. And, you know, I thought it was over. I don't know. Balance is everything in recovery. You know, if I'm not helping myself, then how can I help other people? You know, if I'm not working on myself, then how can I help somebody else? And yeah, it's been a crazy few days leading up to today, because I was scared to talk. I have a hard time talking with my partner about recovery, because, you know, she doesn't understand how crazy I can be, or how I am right to this day, you know. And I know I felt so alone. I felt so lonely, you know. And that's, you know, that's why that's why I brought my brother to come live with me, because, well, first of all, I don't want him to die, and, you know, I needed him back in my life. Life has been good. Like, it's weird, because, you know, I can say all this stuff, but, like, man, like, this is life. This is the way life goes. You know, people make mistakes. I make mistakes. I'm not perfect, and that's really what I wanted to say today. Is people make mistakes, man, and that's life. That's the way life goes in recovery. You know, we make mistakes, and there's people in recovery that would say to me, is that make all the mistakes that you have to do, because it just only helps your sobriety. It helps you help somebody else out when they come to that point in their sobriety. You know, and that sounds bad. Make mistakes, make all the mistakes you can, but it's true, because it doesn't matter what anybody else tells me. Somebody can tell me all their war stories, and somebody can tell me everything that they need to tell me. But am I going to listen? Probably not, until I experience it myself and go through the feelings and the hurt and the pain that I need to feel to change. And don't get me wrong, speaking about change, it's hard to change. It was the hardest thing I had to do in my life, was to try to get sober. And you know, that it's been tough, man. But that's the way life goes. And and what people would say to me in recovery is, we're all gonna struggle, whether we're alcoholics, addicts or not. We're all gonna struggle in life. But would you rather struggle with us or rather struggle on your own? So that right there is what drives me to not struggle on my own. So that's why I keep myself around the addicts and alcoholics. That's why I need help, because I'm an addict and alcoholic, full blown, full time. And I'm not recovered. I'm not recovered. I'll always be in recovery. I'll always be an addict. I'll always be an alcoholic. Because if I forget that, then I'm done. Like I said, there's help out there. There's help. There's so many places that I had no idea where there was help. And even like I had to go to rehab and then find out of these different places on the reserve. I didn't know of these different places, and the help is out there if you want it. If I wanted, the help is out there. And I hate saying that. I hate telling people, well, you gotta want it. I hate saying that, because there's addicts out there who want it, but they can't get it. They don't know who to ask. They don't know where to go. They don't know. And I hope that people, I hope something helps, because yes, like the fentanyl and everything is crazy and people are dying. There's people I know who do fentanyl, people I know who OD'd. My brother has OD'd 8 times. I know, again, it's not my story, but he OD'd 8 times because of fentanyl. People are having seizures on this reserve because of it. They OD'd too many times and they can't get out of it. And that shit scares me, because I have family members who are still using to this day. And it scares me. Like, again, I just, I want to say that there's no other day that I wouldn't want this any other way, there's so many hard times in recovery, but I wouldn't want to change it. Chaos in my life, I love it. I hate it just as much as I love it, because that's the way I lived my life. I lived my life. I stayed busy. I stayed too busy, way too busy. And I need to step back sometimes. But when I do step back, I'm losing it because I'm not staying busy. It's a vicious cycle. But I just, it's a vicious cycle. But I don't have to do this alone. And so that's the biggest thing, is nobody has to do this alone. There's people out here who are struggling. I'm struggling, and I just want people to know that you're not alone. There are people out here who are willing to help. We're out here somewhere. But yeah, I guess I'll close it with that, because thanks for letting me share.
So I wanted to say thank you so much, Stu. This is Stu's first time, everybody, and I think he did beyond an amazing job. And you were really vulnerable with us. You really shared everything when you really didn't have to. And I really commend you. You are an amazing storyteller. And not just that, you really brought about the importance of, just because your healing journey is never ending, right? It's not a 180 and that's it. It's always continuing, and you're always growing, and you're always learning different things. And I just, your story is amazing. And you're right, you're really not alone. And we are here for you. You have a whole community of people who are here for you whenever and wherever you need. So thank you again. And we are so appreciative. And yeah, you're not alone. We're here for you. And with that, he brought out something really important. One, we're going to have Erin coming on to talk about ways that we can support other people in their healing journeys, because one, this has brought about so many different ways that people can be helped. And you might be wondering yourself, how can we help our loved ones through our healing journeys? So we'll have Erin, I'll give it to you now. I'll give you the floor so that you can bring about those ways of change.
Now, Eve. So one of the things that can really help you in thinking about your family and what recovery looks like is to know what the stages of change model looks like. So I just wanted to just be clear with everybody that when we're doing this, when we're going through all of this stuff, to keep in mind that not everybody's journey is the same. Not everybody's journey is gonna, look exactly alike. That each recovery story, each recovery lifestyle is its own. So with that, can I have the first slide, please, Caitlin? So there's stages of change. In this model, there are 6 stages. Some have 4, some have 5, but I like the 6 stage model. And next slide, please. So the pre-contemplation stage, the reason why also I wanted to share this is because sometimes as a family member who is helping somebody or living with somebody or just frustrated with the way things are going with their family member who's addicted, it's hard to understand when you're not the addict, and when you just can't understand like why the heck they just can't stop, right? So there's so many things that go behind that, like trauma and things that happen in people's life. Like Stu was sharing like a lot of stuff that he didn't share, he didn't share with his family. And then also the stigmatism, right? I think Carla spoke about it, being in public, and having like a job where people knew she was an addict, but she still went about her day. So, just remembering that, when we're talking about these stages, just it's only information to help you to try to understand, right? And help your family member. And also to keep in mind that this model is geared towards addict. There is some reference to drug and alcohol specific in here, but when we think about addicts, we think about drugs and alcohol mostly, but keeping in mind that addiction can be food, addiction can be sex, addiction can be gaming, addiction could be social media. There's so many things, and I really enjoy this model because it really encompasses addiction as a whole. So the pre-contemplation stage is really about this is for like almost like the beginner addict. This is like the early stages of an addiction, where you really don't think you have a problem. You're just like, maybe you're like, 15, 16, and life is just infinite to you, and you get into partying, and like Stu said, you're a weekend warrior, and you don't really see a problem with it. Everybody in your social group is doing these things, and it's not a problem. So like as a family member, this is where you start to see the signs, so going out all weekend and then missing work on Friday or on Monday, and then leaving work early, or like you said, spending all your money, but you're like, okay, I had a good time though, right? So you're not really seeing a problem There's many reasons, you know, youth being like probably the biggest one, you know, like life is just, you know, grandiose at that stage. So there's really no problem, but you as the family member might be thinking, oh, maybe there is. And can I have the next slide, please? So the contemplation stage is where so some bad stuff's probably happened. You know, every Sunday you're broke and you don't have no money for lunch for the week. You don't have nothing. You're like, oh my God, you know, I did it again. Why does this keep happening? I got into a fight. I'm not talking to my friends. You know, why did I fight with them? You know, oh, it's because I'm drunk. Every time I'm drinking or using, something bad always happens. And you really start to feel like crap, you know, and maybe now you've gotten into using, you know, during the week just to take the edge off. And you're thinking, yeah, maybe I have a problem. And so in this stage, you know, you as the family member, to be supportive is to just, you know, point it out, you know, in the kindest way possible. You know, yeah, maybe, you know, I noticed that you started using during the week. It used to be just on the weekends. You know, oh, you know what's going on with you and your friend? You know, you got into a fight. Oh, were you drinking or were you using? Or, you know, for gaming, like a lot of youth are gamers. You know, they're young kids, you know, they're slacking on Monday. Well, you know, and they're taking a nap as soon as they get home. Well, you know, you stayed up pretty late gaming, you know, and it's affecting your school, you know, so um, so this is the time too when they're kind of like more open to receiving receiving information from you about your observation, and sometimes it can get taken as like criticism. So, you know, because nobody likes their flaws to be pointed out. So, you know, I'm always talking about treading lightly. I mean, you as a family member know what your boundaries and limits are to talking to your loved ones. So, yeah. Next slide. Okay, so preparation. This is where like you're, you know, you've decided now that you need to stop doing the behavior that's having a negative effect on your life. You'd have to decide, you know, like what change you want to make. You know, you have to decide what change you want to do, and you have to decide how you're going to do it. And a lot of people want to just go through this stage like super fast. They just want to like boom, 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 boom. And this is really the stage where you should stop and you should make a solid plan. You should have like a safety plan. So like when I want to think about, you know, and this is where it really involves you as the family member. When I think about using, who can I call? What programs are on what days? If I don't have a ride, who can take me? Like it's like figuring out all the details so that when that urge to use or that urge gets really, really strong, that you're able to say, nope, look, I have a plan. I don't have to like wander through this alone. This is what is happening. This is what's happening. And you really rely on your support system and your support network in making this preparation plan, right? And it does, it includes like here on Six Nations, you know, a ride, it's a killer, you know, like, you know, somebody lives on, you know, way the heck on 6th line down by the tracks and they have AA in Ashwegan, it might as well be like in Toronto, you know, sometimes if you don't have that support in place, and then that creates hopelessness and makes you want to give up. So make sure, you know, like you figure out those details. And this is, like I said, real important in this stage to just slow down, make the plan, and talk to your family members about how you as the person who's needing the help, how they can help you, and then the family members making a commitment to saying, this is how I can help you, right? So slow down on this stage, and this is where all of the communication happens. This is almost like the foundation of your recovery planning. Okay, the next slide. So the action stage is all about, doing the things. Doing the things that you put into your preparation. And it's about doing other things too, like journaling, writing things down, getting those feelings out. This is uncomfortable. This is the uncomfortable stage. This is where you're doing like the work. This is where you're saying, I'm hurt and this is what hurt me and I need help with this. And this is where, as the family members, this is where, like, I'm sorry for them to say, but could be where the shit hits the fan for your family, right? This is where the person is saying, well, I feel like doing drugs because this happened and this happened, and this could open up like a lot of stuff within the family unit. And as an addictions and mental health counselor, things don't get better until they get better, until they change. Things don't get better until you're willing to make the change. And unfortunately, due to intergenerational trauma, due to family trauma, due to issues, it's never really just the addict or the person doing the negative behaviors. This is like a family situation, as Haudenosaunee people, we would go to our aunties, we would go to our uncles, we would go to our clan families, and we would deal with this together as a community. And I think that that's one of the biggest strengths here at Six Nations, is that we have those clan families, we have those longhouses, we have those things, and we have to make those changes. And this action stage is where a lot of that is going to take place, and it's going to hurt. Recovery is not easy. It's not easy. It's never going to be easy. And, we all just have to be willing to support, and listen, agree to disagree. I'm like freaking stubborn, I don't want to hear or see people point out my flaws, but sometimes I just have to humble myself and be like, so this action stage is like the meat and potatoes of your recovery plan. Next slide, please. Maintenance. So keeping it up, and eventually, I seen this meme on Facebook one time where it said like changed behavior turns into a habit, and a habit turns into a lifestyle, and then your lifestyle changed into your being, right? So this is what the maintenance part about it is like. First of all, just recognizing, going through these steps, and then realizing that you have to make it a lifestyle. Everybody who's in recovery, everybody that I've heard and talked to that's in long-term recovery say like it has to be a lifestyle. It has to be the way you choose to live. And as somebody who is an addict, it really is like consciously having to every day make those choices to do your maintenance, to pray, to smudge, to cry, to journal, and be like with that ganaquillo. It turns into your being. And nobody's recovery journey is the same. Like I said, this maintenance and action stage, these can take years. This doesn't just happen, okay, one day you decide to stop drinking like that. These could take years, these could take months, and that's the whole big piece of it, right? So anybody who's in maintenance, they always have I love hearing their stories because they have the best life stories. So maintenance, from a family member's point of view, could be continuing keeping lines of communication open. Yeah, and supporting the loved ones, building that strong family foundation. And in the maintenance stage, maybe you're pulling in those family members to help them on their journeys as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so now all models have relapse. That's really why I like this model, because it does include relapse. Relapse can and will happen. not in everybody's recovery journey, but they can and will. And the biggest thing that I can say about relapse is that you're never starting from square one, because you're using all those tools that you've taken from all of those first stages. So just always remember, in relapse, it's never about, starting over. You're never hitting rock bottom again. And as a family member watching somebody go through relapse, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because you've seen them do the work, and you know that it could happen. And for the person with the negative behaviors, it's like hits you like a ton of bricks. What just happened? So it's like going back to those like root causes again, and triggers, learning about triggers. Like, I could probably do a whole series on this, but relapse does happen. And just know, as somebody who's relapsed and somebody who's watched somebody go through relapse, just to love, there's just knowing that that person is still there. They're still a human being who deserves to be loved. One of the worst things you can do in relapse is to guilt them or shame them into the relapse, because as a former addict, nobody nobody hits you harder than you hit yourself. So going through these stages, it's really tough for everybody involved. They say that the addict is the whole family goes through these cycles, and that's true. That's true. So be kind in the relapse. A relapse can last the weekend, a night, years. Sorry, my laptop died. So just being mindful that relapse is, relapse can be hard for everybody, like I said. And yeah, next slide. So I just want to do another quick view of this model, because as you can see, it has a spiral in the middle. And what that spiral means is that you can come in and out of all of these. Like, you may start at maintenance again. Once you've been in this cycle, you almost never go back into the pre-contemplation, because you kind of, after you get the notion that you have a problem, you pretty much know that you have a problem. So but I really do like this model, because you do jump in and out of all of this. And yeah, just making sure that you're keeping your support systems. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is we've all been through so much as nations, intergenerational trauma, residential schools, stuff like that. And we talk about blood memory and how our blood remembers hurt and trauma. It also remembers good, like the pride that we have. So, but going back to remembering those traumas, we all feel them, and we've all had those nights. I really don't know a lot of people who haven't had those nights where somebody from their family came home drunk, and there's a fight, or some BS happened, or someone got pulled over for drinking and driving, and you gotta go to the court and get them out. There's just a bunch of stuff. There's all this stuff that comes with all of this trauma and addiction, and talking about it. So I have been both the person who was intervented, and also have been the person doing the intervention. From the person who was being, intervented, my family came and talked to me about, I had several family members talk to me about thinking that, it was enough now. You've been through enough, And at this point I had kids, you know, and my family members had said, you know, like, if you don't smarten up, we're gonna have to call children's aid on you. And I was pissed. I was so mad, you know, because I was like, oh man, you know, so what? We have some drinks and a couple chairs get broken. It's just what happens, right? And I was scared. I was scared. Like you know, I was lucky that my family members came and talked to me and said, like, you know, you need to get your shit together, because not, you know, sometimes that doesn't happen, or we're gonna call children's aid. And then I did. I got scared. Like I couldn't imagine the thought of losing my kids. Like I couldn't imagine it. I was freaking out. And so that's when my contemplation happened. Maybe I do have a problem. Like, if my aunt who like lives down the road, you know, knows, and that's another thing too, like, you think people don't know. That's one of my biggest lessons. My grandma was like, you think we don't know? It's like, oh, so you do know. So anyways, yeah. I got scared, you know, and made me go into that contemplation stage. And then having to be the person who intervened with a family member. It was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I did the same thing, you know. I went to the family member and I was like, look, you know, this has happened and this has happened and things are getting pretty bad. And I tried to stay calm, and like, I'm that person. I just want to be like angry. My first go-to emotion is anger. Like, I just want to be mad. And so I had to change my ways, because obviously being mad hadn't got me anywhere. So that wasn't working. So when intervening with the family members is one of the hardest things. You know, it hurts, you know, because it hurts getting the finger pointed at you. It hurts, you know, everything. The whole recovery plan, and with your addicted family member or being the addict, everything, everything feels horrible until you start believing in yourself, until you start being sober, until that little switch in your mind goes off and says, oh, I keep doing this to myself. You know, I keep doing this to myself. I choose. I have the power. I have the power to quit. I have the power to stay sober. I have a power to not live this life anymore. And, you know, some people, unfortunately, it takes longer for that click to happen, you know. And I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I know in my life I have really big aunties who have that big auntie power, and they intervened. And, you know, um, it was what I needed. And it also gave me the strength to be able to come into my other, like, my family members and say, you know, this is what I noticed, and I love you. I love you. I don't want to see you go through this anymore. Because that's what I needed. So with Stu and Carla sharing your stories about what you needed really helps to recover. Really helps us to recover. And I just want to say, like, anybody who's still struggling, or in any part of those stages, you know, just keep going. You got this. We got this. You know, we can do it. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Carla and Stu. Thank you all so much for today. I think this is something that a lot of people need and want to hear, and I really hope that for a lot of people who are listening in on this, that this is helping you, that this is guiding you, and that this is giving you hope. And as we close today, before Stu does his closing, I just want to remember We have a lot of resources available in the community, and just know again that you are not alone. So yeah, did Carla or Stu, do you have one final thing to say? And then we'll have Stu close. I'll begin with Carla. Sorry, you're on mute.
How can I share this with everyone? Like, because I didn't really know, was kind of skeptical of letting people know that I was going to be on live on Facebook. And I just know that some people probably need to hear this, need to hear my story as well as everyone else's, Stu, Aaron. And I just would like to share that with them, because when I discuss that on my social media, I'm always proud of being able to help somebody else, especially within my community, because I'm kind of right there with Stu. I'm getting back into my culture, I'm getting back into the medicines, and I'm getting back into me. And I want to be able to help people within our community, as more or less the youngsters, and just let them know that I will always be here to help you. And I'm just glad to be able to help everybody, especially within my community. And I thank everybody, y'all.
Thank you, Carla. So this is being recorded, and Caitlin has given has shared the link below. So afterwards, what'll happen is that it'll go on YouTube, and you can feel free to share with your friends and family and anybody. And there's a direct link to that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and Stu, do you have anything final you want to say? And you can close as well.
Yeah, I guess I just, I want to thank everybody for, again, letting me share today. That was something I definitely needed to get off my chest as well. And, I appreciate everybody for listening. I just want to say that, for the people who don't know, who don't have anywhere to go, who are skeptical of AA, there are meetings out here that is not specific to AA and NA. There's addiction meetings. There will be a NA meeting starting soon. But that'll be later discussed with some people. But there will be an NA group starting soon. So, if people just want to come check it out, people just want to hear. People don't. You don't even have to come and say anything. Just come and listen to us talk shit. It might help. And then, the last thing I'll say is, higher power is everything. They told me, if you don't believe in God, believe in a group of drunks or a group of druggies. Because if you start praying to that group, if you start praying to a power greater than ourselves, some crazy things are happening. And I guarantee it, So yeah, I just want to say higher power is everything, If you're skeptical of the God or whatever it is, this has to be a group of drunks, group of druggies. Throw it out in the universe and it might come back. I pretty much guarantee it. So yeah, I'll close it up. Dana gigana gai koton dagi sa swai na dio na sni so kwego. Handane di gai na hanji dwight for canton. Sani samgwai wa se na gon se ti handro no wai nando. Ne nenga ne kai ne ti for the gatto na ga no honyo. Gai ha ni swe he kona na ne dwe ara gihaska and why yeah. Nani ang kwa ni go hasko. Ang kwa ni go ha so. Ska de jidwarat no honyo. that again you took many on Guadigo. And that took quite none of what when I in Angana, someone's a day, the young West of a teen part, the young West of Rock Quack. To know how Nandit one home quack. Equatoga eat Nanik so that hot cough and Nanto went a gift. Elite, they make a dohon to home in this cannot not to know. Nidine Doga speak a year, Nicodoga Nikagoya. Sanisa quite hot Nanto went a gift. And down Nidine. I got away and only those are the Etinohonio. Someone's a date one no heart did one home quack. Nequaton Nequego. Necoto Nequego sat near her. That again you took Nanny on Guadigo. And I took quite none of what when I and then gonna it's on Agana Katai Hondonio again against Bogina, we focus on home. Kay handy on the donio, set the guy find for no, in that room as a gate. And on a dig I or the beast home gay. That's a quite hot and two as a gay, and on a dinner, don't say the Etinohonio. Gain against Bogina, we focus on home. That again you took Nanny on Guadigo. And that took quite none of what when I and then gonna again you got doggy had he up your note, the okay, you don't. Negana is going on to not to know. Negande, Negani Quaki, Negwego, I find go who did a quite show. And I need on a idiot, those yet on your. In your good doggy now had he up your note, the okay, you don't. That again you took now go on. And that took quite none of what when I it's our guy and that's how that. I tell you, man, yep, that's some way this song. It's our guy and duck make a funny shot in that two and the key. And they got dogas and who we are hooking go is. They just I find fun. So now so I'm going to hit my hand over. How about trying young? Nigane wado nas dogo manas can you and down it hip by is as any Hawaii who nation way it is. What you should get any home here. It did any touch bar job, Anthony, as of Nico Hio, set tough and Zari as and way it is. And down it in air now, whatever you know, and it that you said, what no, you so don't go on asking in the you. That again you to name Guanico. And that took quite none of what one know, yeah. And then gonna how gay con thì đi ăn nó cái nè sang quay đi xong này cái ở san nó nhá này xong trong sát trong này cái nó à đúng nhá này lên này cái này hạt hạt tiêu ní chưa kể nhá xong nè đi công việc hàng ghét này họ đang đi đón số mà nè muốn đi chơi đến nhá xin được đến nhá and đó này đi nè nè qua đâu bây giờ nó đi nè did you say what no no con he de hana great in as way so that again you talk now going to go and down it talk none of what we need again guy get up man in nanga the but get to nanga no no down it
All right, thank you everybody for attending today. And thank you, Stu, for opening and closing. And I hope that everybody leaves here with a good mind and a good heart. And so many things I could say. We could have done this all day. Like this could have been an all-night thing, or an all-day thing. But we'll save that for next time. And I just want us to be able to keep these stories coming and know that everybody is on their own healing journey. Like Aaron said, it's not just substance use, it's also could be food, sex, exercise, and to really take care of yourselves for the rest of this day and in the future. So thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Una.